Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to part 4 of spooky season. And I'm not gonna lie, honestly, trying to pump out videos every other day is so much hard work. I have no idea how these YouTubers do it, where they do, you know, daily videos or 4 videos every week. I take my hat off to them because this is some serious hard work. But today we are going to be looking at a really fascinating case. We are going to be diving in to the real truth behind the Amityville horror film. In my opinion, the Amityville horror, the original 1979 film, is one of the best horror films I have ever seen. I'm a bit of a classics girl. Much prefer those sort of time period horror films, and Amityville has always been one of my favorites, if for no other reason than the incredibly handsome James Brolin. I mean, can we just take a second to appreciate this gorgeous man? So if you haven't seen the film, go and do it. Remember, go for the original, not the remake. The remake's okay, but the film is set around the Lutz family, who move into a home in Amityville in Long Island and very quickly realise that the house is possessed. The family experience many forms of paranormal experiences. They have changes in their own characters and they end up fleeing the house in sheer terror. But what you may not know is that the film is actually based on a real life case, and that the Lutz family actually do exist. So let's take a little look back and find out exactly what has happened in this famous house. So 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville is, by any stretch of the imagination, a dream home. It has 6 bedrooms, it's huge, it had a swimming pool, it had its own boathouse, tons of outside space in a really nice neighbourhood. A home that anybody would be proud to have. The house was happily occupied by the DeFeo family for many years until tragedy struck the house on November the 13th, 1974. At some time around 3:15 a.m., Ronald DeFeo Jr., the eldest of 5 siblings, woke up, committed an unspeakable crime. The then 23-year-old got a rifle, went up into his parents' bedroom, shot his parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, then walked into the bedrooms of each of his 4 siblings, again fatally shooting them. After committing this horrific crime, Ronald Jr. then callously goes, takes a bath, gets himself ready, and leaves the house as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until 6 p.m. the following evening that Ronald Jr. pretended that he'd gone home and had just discovered this massacre. The police very quickly realised that something didn't add up with his story. Now, there's been some suggestion that Ronald Jr. was a habitual drug user, that he was dabbling in the occult and Satanism, and pretty much just had gone down a not great path. He initially told police that he had just gone back to the house and had found his entire family had been murdered. He then changed it to say that there was a mafia involvement, and that was the reason why. His story changed many times. However, the police did not believe a single word. It was believed that he had in fact carried out this brutal slaying of his family in order to collect life insurance money on his parents. Now, the life insurance was for the amount of $200,000, which the equivalent in today's money would be much more. So you're not talking a small chunk of change here. Ronald is subsequently arrested quite quickly. He's taken to trial. During his trial, his defense tried to claim that he had suffered a paranoid psychosis. And they got a psychiatrist in to argue that fact. However, the prosecution also got a psychiatrist in who, whilst acknowledging that clearly Ronald Jr. was suffering from some kind of mental illness, he knew right from wrong. So if he was looking to be able to claim not guilty on the grounds of insanity, it wasn't going to work. And in fact, it didn't work. Ronald Jr. was sentenced to 6 concurrent life sentences for the murder of his family. And he is in fact still alive. He is still carrying out his sentence, and he is currently in a correctional facility in New York. So you've had a mass murder in this house. Clearly the locals are very wary. This is going to make the house much less sellable. Rumours had already started to circulate that maybe there was some kind of supernatural presence in the house that had added to the reason why Ronald Jr. would have committed this crime. Like I say, there was rumours that he was dabbling in the occult and was practicing Satanistic rituals. And strangely enough, when the bodies were discovered, they were all discovered lying on their stomachs on their beds with no sign of struggle. And you would think that if you had gone and to shoot 6 different people, that at some point somebody would have woke up. There was no silencer on the gun either, and strangely none of the neighbours heard any kind of gunshot. But that's all it appeared to be, just rumours. And so 1 year later, that takes us to the Lutz family acquiring the house. George and Kathy Lutz were in their mid-30s. They had just recently got married. Kathy had 3 children from a previous marriage, and this should have been one of the happiest times of their lives. George, by all accounts, was a fantastic stepfather. He was really everything that you would want as a single parent. When you meet somebody, you want them to love and take care of your children, and he very much did this. They decided to start looking for their new marital home. Between them, Kathy had some savings and George had a successful business. They had a budget of around $60,000 to buy a home in the area, and they were looking and they couldn't find anything. And then 112 Ocean Avenue came to their attention. Now, this property was listed at $80,000, which, although over their budget, was so reasonably priced for the area and for the size of the house, they had to go and have a look. So they went and they just fell in love with the place. I mean, why wouldn't you? There's so much space for the children to grow up in. You've got your own boathouse. George wanted to own a boat. You had all this space, really nice area. And so, despite knowing what had happened in the house, they decided to go ahead. It was too good of an opportunity to miss. And so they went ahead and they stretched their finances and they bought the property. However, immediately after moving in, it became very clear that there was something very, very wrong with this house. And within just 1 month, the family would flee the home in absolute terror, leaving behind all of their possessions, bar a couple of sets of clothes each. Kathy had always been praised for her children and how well behaved they were, how they knew how to act. They knew what was expected of them. She very rarely needed to discipline them. Just a really lovely family. However, when they move into this house, suddenly the kids are acting up, and not just normal kids trying to adjust to a new setting kind of acting up. They were going crazy. And for the first time, both George and Kathy, despite it being against their nature up until this point, were using physical means to discipline these kids. So all of them, their personalities started to change when you think you're moving into this dream house that actually you'd be so happy. George in particular is said to have shown signs of depression. He became very moody, he didn't want to be around the family, he spent a lot of time by himself. But this is where things get really creepy. The family claim that they experienced green slime oozing from the walls that appeared to come from nowhere. They also noticed that in the toilets in the house, there was kind of a brown tar-like substance that appeared and stained the toilets that they could not get rid of, and there was no reason as to why this would suddenly appear. The youngest daughter also claimed to have made an imaginary friend. Well, when I say friend, it was actually a pig, and she called this pig Jody. Now, one evening, George was outside and he looked up into the daughter's bedroom where he saw the daughter standing in the window, and then he saw the face of a pig next to her with bright red eyes. There would be times when the garage door would move and open and close by itself. There was times when all of a sudden snow came out of nowhere, and when they looked outside, there were hoof prints, kind of like a pig, outside of the property going down towards the garage. They discovered a small room down in the basement. Now this room was on none of the plans that they had been given before they'd moved into the property, and they hadn't noticed it before. And when I say room, it was barely big enough for two people to stand in, but it was painted in bright red. They also found tools that are connected to occultism down in the room, so it's believed that this may have been where Ronald Jr. may have practiced. Now, Kathy, being a devout Catholic, had called in a priest to come and do a blessing on the house. And a priest came to the house, and you may, if you've seen the film, you may recognize this. The priest went into one room in particular, and it was while he was in this room that he heard a very distinctive voice, despite there being nobody else there, saying, "Get out." Now, it was, the priest believed very much that this was a demon. In fact, he told the Lutz family this. He told the Lutz family not to sleep in the house, to leave the house, and do not take any of your possessions with you. Something really creepy, though, was that the Lutz family slept in the same beds that the DeFeo family were murdered in. As in, the mattresses were changed, but the bed frames were still the same. Now, it's one thing buying a house where a mass murder has taken place. It's quite another to keep the furniture that these people were murdered on. I wouldn't want to sleep in a bed knowing that somebody had been murdered in it. Never mind have my kids sleeping in the beds. Like, that to me that's really odd. George Lutz also claims that he saw Kathy levitating off of her bed. Both Kathy and George also claim that they saw the children doing the same thing. So you're talking about really, really creepy stuff going on in this house. And like I said, just 1 month after they moved in, one night the whole thing got too much, and the family in the middle of the night got in their car, drove away, and literally never went back to that house in sheer terror. So after this had all happened, the house was investigated by renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they both claimed to have felt things in this house. In fact, they claimed that at that point that was the most haunted house that they had ever been to. In fact, Lorraine claimed that while she was upstairs in what was the sewing room, she had never felt closer to hell than she felt in that room. After all of this, obviously the film got made. From the information that I can gather, the film did stay pretty true to the story that the Lutz family told had happened in this house. The Lutz family ended up selling 112 Ocean Avenue, and they took a big loss on that. They ended up selling it for $55,000. So, I mean, that's a huge difference percentage-wise than what they bought it for. There are claims, of course, that the family made it all up, that they were in some kind of financial difficulty, and that they had done it to be able to write a book, which happened, obviously, with the rights to the movie being bought and whatnot. However, both Kathy and George took lie detector tests that both came back that they were telling the truth. Now, I just find this all fascinating. I mean, I would love to go and visit this house and see for myself what it is like. So, what do you guys think? Do you think that this is the case of a family who had stretched themselves financially too far and were trying to find a way to, you know, recoup some of that? Or is it that this house has some kind of demonic entity in it? Maybe at some point somebody had opened a portal to be able to let the energy through. Interestingly, as well as Ronald DeFeo Jr. dabbling with the occult, it's claimed that George Lutz himself also had a history of doing the same thing. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a like. Click on the subscribe button if you haven't already. Go and watch the film. Let me know what you think if you've already seen it. You know, this is a perfect time of year to be watching horror films. And I hope you are enjoying this spooky season, guys. And we've got tons more super interesting videos, interesting cases, paranormal stuff coming up as per usual. So make sure you come back on Friday for the next installment of spooky season. I will see you then.